Hello everyone and welcome to the Infinity Gauntlet Snap Arena 2nd edition. I'm Raven and joining me once again is KMBest, our Marvel Snap expert over here, and we'll be taking you through another tournament we have of the draft format. As you may have noticed from the previous one we've done, we are missing Chris. He's not going to be joining us at this time, but it is for a good reason, because he's just had the birth of his baby. So congratulations to Chris for that one, and I look forward to seeing him in the future for more of these tournaments. But KM, welcome back. I was going to say we had a great time. I can only speak for myself, but I had a great time. But are you looking forward to going through another draft tournament?
Absolutely. I was blown away by the response to the previous draft tournament. I was blown away by the interest. I actually watched it back on my stream. I was so shocked at how many people were so interested in this format. I even brought it up on my podcast, The Snapshot, about 2 weeks later when we had Molt on, and he was super enthused about this format. And a spoiler alert, that's one of the players that's in this tournament. So like when we talk about the ease with which it is, you can get into this format and the ease with which you can understand it and the complexity and depth that it has, it's the Marvel Snap of Marvel Snap formats. I really enjoyed it.
And before we get into revealing the roster for this edition, just quickly, do you want to just go over what this draft format is? Because it is a unique format. It's not part of the actual in-game formats that are available right now. It's a little bit different. So for those watching that are new to it, do you want to just take us through what it involves?
So the draft format creates a sort of cube of 48 cards that are owned by both players. This then is the draft pool. Both players take turns picking cards out of the draft pool until they have decks. This introduces a bit of a competitive element to the picks that you are making. It also introduces an element of balance. So, for example, one of the classic things you see a lot in draft is Dr. Doom being a very valuable card. You pick a Dr. Doom, your opponent is almost always going to look, is there a white queen? So I can steal that Dr. Doom so I can actually have some counterplay there. And that is the general way in which this format evolves. You pick a Devil Dinosaur, you better be really sure there's not a Super Skrull there. Things like that are going to be really important to watch, and the draft itself is going to be some of the most important part of this, even more important to my mind than play skill in the actual game.
Yeah, I think the important thing as well to think about is a lot of the time, or most of the time, players are picking 2 cards at a time, and you don't have a lot of time to decide on what cards you're going to pick, and that time pressure really adds an extra layer to it. But before we get into the first match, we best look at what those matches are going to be, at least to kick it off, as we can take a look at the bracket and see who are going to be playing. We are going to have Eggs versus FreshLobster, sorry, I'll try and get my words out, coming up first, and then we've got Kawa versus Molt, Zeee versus Dmoney, and OrdinaryHarry versus Lambyseries. So we've got a few players invited back after the Infinity Gauntlet Snap Arena first, and I had the joy as well of very recently hanging out with the majority of these players at the Creator Clash, so they're fresh off a tournament themselves for most of them. But as you mentioned, you were talking to Molt about this, and Molt's one of the players we do have. So you know, who are you thinking here? Of course, Lamby's always a danger in any given tournament, but what about some of the newer players to this one?
I think there are very big question marks for me. One of the things about the returning players, Lamby, Kawa, Harry, these are all people who I know have played the format. I have watched play the format, and I understand what to do in the draft phase. If you don't understand what to do in the draft phase, it doesn't matter how good you are. You're going to have a worse deck. Your opponent is going to be able to outmaneuver you from the get-go because they'll have better tools to do it.
When we get into the draft, we'll see how tough it is because you've got limited time to even see what cards are available, never mind create some form of plan. And then as the draft happens, that plan has to be reacted to pretty quickly. Well, let's see how it goes. Let's get into the draft phase of this one. Again, can't wait to just see the cards initially. That's the big one. Here we go. KM, take us through this. We see the cards in the middle that are available for both players, but once a card's been chosen, it gets removed from the other player's option. Zabu pick up for Eggs first, but you know, what's the rest going to be? I see a white queen there, KM.
I see a white queen, and I don't see a ton of incredibly powerful. The white queen going off the board is important, but I don't see a ton of great targets for it, right? White queen is good, but really a lot of the great cards in here look like they're 5s. The Zabu pick is honestly pretty slick, right? As long as we have the ability to get 4s at some point in the future. And it also, like, there doesn't seem to be a lot of general utility. So what FreshLobster is doing here with White Queen and Arrow, I think is pretty slick. He's just picking for power. Those cards will go in anything, where it's not necessarily always going to be like that. Now you see Eggs picking up the Moon Girl, presumably just as a 4, right? A card that I think is...
Go on.
A card that I think is underrated in this format, or in this specific pool, would be Rescue. Because normally the Rescue isn't very good. It gets Shang-Chi'd. There's not a Shang-Chi here. And so Rescue ends up being a very, very potent unit.
I'm already worried about what's going on the left side of this screen so far, because yeah, the Zabu pick one, that's fine, but White Queen got like stolen away from like the Zabu play in the form of Eggs this time. And for me, like, yeah, Namor's decent. You Rescue, I completely agree, is good, you know, above decent 100%.
Yeah.
But now like Moon Girl above Rescue, above Namor really surprises me, because my worry, I actually think Eggs timed out and got that Captain America. That wasn't even on purpose. So already the time getting to the players, because for me, if I was Eggs and I picked Zabu, then my opponent just picked White Queen already. If I didn't go straight for that Rescue, I would just cancel the Zabu. Zabu is a 2/2 that does nothing, or more or less does nothing, is what I would do, because I'm looking at cards like White Tiger, Odin there as well, Groot's there as well. You know, there's enough Odin shenanigans just at a glance to at least think, well, hang on a minute, how many draft decks are going to be White Tiger and then Odin White Tiger? That is a lot of power.
I think you're right about that. You could take White Tiger Odin with 2 picks, and then you have things like, you know, Medusa and Groot. That'll also be additional Odin synergy. I think
Gamora in there as well. Like
right now. Yeah, either player could pivot into that right now if they wanted to. They have 2 picks available.
And you've just got to think, like, because as you can clearly see from the decks on either side of this screen, the decks will not be the smoothest, you know, most well-built things in the world. Therefore, you've got to think, well, hang on a minute. If I put 14 power on the board and an extra 9 with the Odin and the actual White Tiger itself, like, how does my opponent beat that? It also has the benefit of hitting those locations like Sanctum Sanctorum, you know, a kiln, anything that locks you out normally. Well, the Tigers can go there, so it gives you that extra backup plan, whereas it looks like Eggs is leaning now towards the ongoing plan. Yes, there's the Moon Girl in there, but there's the Namor Omega Red Onslaught, so of course Namor wouldn't work with other cards, but still the ongoing plan is there.
Yeah, and now we see the Wolfsbane getting picked up. And one thing FreshLobster can do here is not actually pick up the White Tiger right now, because it's not like Eggs is really a serious risk for picking that up unless she completely runs out of things to pick up. The Medusa is a solid one. A card I'm surprised that I'm not seeing off the board right now is Sentinel, which I consider just a generically decent card. And when we're looking at these decks, like there's, you know, we're getting into the range where a Sentinel is just going to be a better pick than a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, it gives you something to do every turn past 2, right? If you have it, you know, on curve, obviously, and that is very powerful. I'm glad Eggs picked up the Orca. Does go for the Lockjaw with that Wasp as well a little bit earlier on. But the Orca, again, for me, I would have picked Orca before some of these other cards that say Fresh or Eggs has picked, because in this format, you just leave a lane open and play Orca. Like, not a lot beats that. That is a ton of power.
It's the high evolutionary Hulk of this format right now. Like it is a 1-lane winner. That is what it is.
And now there are still good cards as well. I like Cable there too. I think
I was going to ask you about Cable, actually. Like Cable in this format specifically seems kind of compelling to me, given how competitive the drafts tend to get in terms of your opponent is taking cards that you would want. Which I wonder if that, do you think that raises the value of Cable at all?
It does to an extent, but for me, I think it's more of, it's just another thing to do, which will then get you another option later, generally speaking, right?
Sure.
It draws a card and you've got more options. And when you have more options in a game like this, in a format like this, you normally have more power, right? Like that's normally the choice you get. And you just get information on your opponent. Something I like in Conquest is, well, yeah, you can argue the whole, they were never going to draw the card. That's fine, but now you know they are not going to play the card this round, right? You know that for a fact because he steals that card away. It's the same logic as
Spider-Ham.
Spider-Ham or the 1/2 I've just random Yondu. There we go. Same logic as that. You just know they cannot play that card. So we do see the Cable and Sentinel get picked up on the left, yeah, and those decks are going to be locked in. But we saw Group Gamora. I am honestly shocked. I think FreshLobster's deck is good, but I am shocked there's no White Tiger. I think that is so strong.
I am, first things first, extremely impressed with FreshLobster's mustache. I want to get that out of the way before I say anything else. That's incredible. Sinister London Scorpion is devastating in this format. In decks that are already struggling to keep up, Sinister London Scorpion is an absolute hammer.
Hear me out. Pass, 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 pass. Orca Sinister London. Is that?
I will not hear you out on the grounds of Nidavellir exists.
Fine, you can win this round, but I'll get you next time. But yeah, I completely agree. Not only is FreshLobster got a fantastic mustache, but also a really cool guy. I enjoyed hanging out with him a lot at the Creator Clash, and he got stuck actually between two doors, legitimately stuck, which was a fun event, which I'll maybe talk about a little bit later if you don't know that story. But we are going to see the Scorpion coming out now and reducing Eggs' hand down significantly. And suddenly the Orca, still strong if solo, but now we know it's likely not going to be solo because of Sinister London, not quite going to be as powerful.
Yeah, and that snap from FreshLobster was good, right? It wasn't just like, oh, I'm insta-snapping. I'm instantly going to put this on here. I'm going to wait a little bit. I'm going to think about it, and then I'm going to snap onto when I play the Scorpion. It was a little bit more disguised.
Yeah, and already just Eggs has Sentinel, which is good, as we said. It's just the gap filler, right, in a lot of these outcomes. But just look at the general card quality of Lobster's hand right now. Right. Not only are they good cards, but there's options.
And a Gamora on Avengers compound.
Yep.
So there's that.
And then turn 6 Aero to pull the thing out of Sinister London if Lobster has priority, which is I've been playing a lot of Aero recently, and it is backbreaking when that happens. Like, you pretty much just win if you get priority and can Aero, and you think they're going to play like one big thing. Like, it's just all over.
Yep. I mean, there is something to be said for like, maybe we should save the Gamora for the Sinister London, but like it's not worth it. Just play it here and hope you end up with priority. I think it is very likely that you do end up with priority, given, you know, what we know about Eggs' deck. It seems unlikely that anything really gets you here.
Look at it. A Cable versus a Gamora turn 5. These are the things that will lose you rounds. Because even though, yes, it's 9 versus 12, the overall just power play here is huge. And now, even the Nightcrawler pickup going to be nice. And Lobster just knows, right? Priority plus Aero, like I said. What it'll do is Aero will pull the last played thing. If it's Sinister London, it pulls it sort of to nowhere because it's Sinister London, and then out of Sinister London as the second one gets spawned.
Making that play is actually pretty slick. He's giving himself an out for, with the other play, if Nightcrawler filled up Nidavellir and Eggs managed to fill up Avengers compound somehow, it actually would not pull if Aero went over to Avengers compound. So by doing it like this, he guarantees the Aero pull.
Yeah. Lobster now just showing off the onslaught card he's got.
It is nice.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree. These are the small things, right? These are when you know a player goes from being all right at the game to good at the game, right? Because that would be easy to miss. Just go, oh yeah, Nightcrawler Aero, perfect, it worked. And then when that goes wrong is when you learn that lesson where you could have ordered it better. But Lobster, of course, ahead of the game here. I think, X gonna step out.
That the Aero is going somewhere or giving himself a better shot at avoiding downside scenarios, basically. It's not a guarantee, but it's giving yourself a better chance at avoiding an already unlikely scenario, but you always make that play.
Oh, okay. Collapsed Mine. I think neither player having any benefits of destroy, right? There's no death, I don't think. There's no, anything that could cause havoc. There's no Phoenix Force, for example. Although I am one of these conspiracy theorists now that I think that collapsed mine, like, I don't know how the numbers work with Phoenix Force, because is the rock one rock or is it 4 rocks? So if 4 rocks die and say a Human Torch dies, have you got a 50-50 chance of hitting Human Torch on a rock? Or do you have a 1 in 5 chance of hitting Human Torch?
I believe it's a 1 in 5.
Because I have hit that Human Torch an absurd number of times in this scenario. I'm not even joking.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that is really interesting.
To the extent, I know, I've pped card games for long enough to know how numbers work, generally speaking. But, like, it happened enough times for me to go, is a rock just a rock when it comes to resurrection? Or is it a rock times 4 or times X? So yeah, anyway, I'm talking about nonsense now, but anyway, interesting thoughts. Maybe we'll find out one day. But for now, Lobster just doing the good stuff, right? As we said, like, as the deck kind of just does.
Eggs being forced to play the Lockjaw middle sort of sucks, because her ideal turn is going to be Medusa plus Electra later. But, like, that's not even that good when you think about it even harder, because a lot of her good targets are already in her hand. That Orca, that Onslaught, those are the cards that are already there. FreshLobster snapping here, I don't even know what it's related to necessarily. Like, I think it's just, I'm doing stuff and you don't seem to be doing stuff.
Yeah, and look, it's 4 into 4, but those are Rescue and White Queen into something likely to be playing, options on turn 5 or 6 if Odin isn't good enough. It's like, yeah, the hand's just good, and I think at this point, a lot of the power of FreshLobster snaps just from the fact that he saw the deck that got drafted. I'd be confident if I was Lobster in this scenario. Very similar to, I think it was OrdinaryHarry versus, was it Nicolina, the first match in the previous one, where Harry's deck was just better, and it just let him just snap and snap and snap, because it's like the draw is just on average X amount of times better than your opponent.
Yeah, and I do think this is actually a pretty decent situation for Eggs, though, if it is pull-offable. But I think right now we're really feeling the loss of this rescue. Like, if Eggs had this rescue and was able to do something with rescue here, I think that would be oh no. Well, that's the thing, right? One player has Zabu, but the other player has White Queen and rescue. Right.
And
that's purposeful.
Oh yeah, of course, but that is where the problem lies right now, at least for me.
Eggs going for the fill play on 5, setting up for a turn 6 Orca, but unfortunately there's no empty lane for that turn 6 Orca, and intriguingly, it looks like Arrow is gonna make it so that fill play doesn't even happen.
Yeah, the Medusa is gonna get pulled across. I will say, though, even if there's no empty lane, Orca's still a 6-11, right? It's a significant number, but Eggs, I think, is going to struggle just winning the other location, right? Like, yes, you can drop an Orca and say, well, that's loads of power, let's go, but it's winning the first location. It is the big problem here, because look at it, 4-5-3 power against 17-9-2, and obviously now we can see Lobster going to double 3 on 6, so still played this whole round out and just sat on White Queen and Odin at the end. Just didn't even need him.
My eyes rolled into the back of my head when I saw that Electra pop out of the Lockjaw. Like, I know that a lot of her good targets are already in her hand, but those are, I think, literally the 2 worst in the entire deck that you've gotten out of the Lockjaw.
It was really unfortunate. And this is one of the things where, like, there is some fancy things you can do. Eggs is obviously looking at trying to get some Lockjaw value, trying to get something bigger on the board. But you've got to look at this, especially now. This is a perfect scenario, right? This is
the best one we have. We have Sentinel Moon Girl in a game where resources are not constricted by energy.
This is as good as it gets. Smash those Sentinels, right? Just play Sentinel every single turn for the rest of the game. That's what I would do right now.
I think this is, like, we have... One of the things that Elysium does is allow decks that generate their own resources to reach an entirely new level, because those cards like Sentinel, are balanced around relatively low power for the cost. And if you can offset that, which we can here, suddenly what we're doing is filling up every single space on the board with a bunch of units. And in a format like this, it's pretty hard to beat that.
Yeah, again, generally speaking, you just want to be doing more stuff than your opponent. Lobster gives a little bit of a wince there, which is like, okay, this one's going bad. Now there's
I think
Onslaught.
if eggs snapped right now, I think Lobster would leave.
So here's something I've been thinking about lately, because you've been playing a ton of Conquest. Like, it sounds stupid. Like, should eggs just not snap and try and take and just like make Lobster think about playing till the end? Is that because I know that's something people talk and think about, right? Is like, oh, snap and then they insta leave for one. Could I have pulled two from them?
I don't think that you could have pulled two from them, though. Like, I think FreshLobster is going to leave a game where he is severely behind, and it will only become more and more apparent that he is severely behind as we keep playing more and more cards. And I think that actually, if anything, the snap was earlier. Once the Elysium popped up, once we were like, okay, this hand is our best shot at actually getting cubes out of this, the snap was supposed to be earlier on 1 or 2.
Well, X has now managed to do some damage to FreshLobster, so that's definitely something. Another Zabu to start off with. Bifrost, again, I don't think is going to have a major impact for either player. Don't think any players have any move synergy.
Captain America Onslaught is not nothing. I don't necessarily think it's the most likely win I've ever seen.
Now, what about Omega Red Onslaught?
What about Moon Girl into Orca?
I mean, yeah. If it was Elysium, I'd be right there with you. Just Orca.
Moon Girl, Orca.
No, that's a deck that's going to be made soon.
All right, so
again. Hitting with Groot so big here because it doesn't look like much, but just dropping a 3/6 is again significant.
I mean, Captain America's maximum power here, we're talking 3/6, and they just got that for free, even without filling a lane up. I am interested in this though. All right, Lobster is snapping, and it's very hard to blame him given his hand. I don't think he's put together what I would call like the kind of deck you could take on the ladder. But I do think he's put together a deck that is generally consistent enough to get things done in this format.
Oh, 100%. Just in terms of raw power, as we said, when you know there isn't a Shang-Chi, the game kind of does just become about putting out the most amount of power. And we're going to see Rescue. Rescue's going to hop across to Machine World with the Bifrost. And then I imagine it's going to just be like Gamora mid. Because
I'm a little confused by... Correct me if I'm wrong. The Nightcrawler move, it would take up his move, correct? If Bifrost moved him? Because that's the only justification I can think of for the Stark, not letting him go on to Stark Tower and getting the points.
I don't think it doesn't with Jeff, right? If you,
I can't think of any other reason why you wouldn't let him move to Stark Tower. I am also
Me neither. I can't think of anything right now. I'm sure Lobster will watch this when it's out and then say, oh, well, it was this. Or do what I would likely do and say, yeah, I just kind of messed up. You know what I mean? Like, just say, yeah, it happens. Maybe it was one of those things. It's something I'm guilty of. Is Lobster knows he wants Nightcrawler on the right at some point, right? And it's just move it on the right, so gets it out the way. Nothing's going to happen with it. It's where it needs to be. Yes, it's less power than it could have, but you just get it dealt with.
All right, so we are now... I mean, if we here, meaning Lobster is in a dominant position from here. Eggs going for the onslaught in the middle. I'm not even sure she's going to win the middle with that play, but it's certainly possible. Onslaught into Wasp actually is pretty slick.
What do you think about this play from Lobster? Because I'll be honest, I've not sat and counted it, but I think I would have just whirlwind slammed Odin and just.
Odin is more points, right? Like Star-Lord is 5, Medusa is 5, Odin is
million.
So his worry is the machine world, right? His worry is what if she just plays on machine world? Yeah, we really could have used those 2 points from the Nightcrawler if we had let it go on to Stark Tower.
Because it's funny, right? Because like Eggs could do the switcheroo, right, and just smash Orca into Machine World and just be like, "Let's go."
It would work, right? Like smashing Orca into Machine World. FreshLobster is now very much playing around smashing Orca into Machine World here. Orca, of course, being a 6'11", would bring Eggs up to 15 points in that lane, and so the Scorpion wasn't going to cut it as a hedge there. And so
look at Lobster. I think he knows.
Yeah, he knows he might be hedging a little too much.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's the way.
And he knows he did. Let's see.
Gonna be 7. Yeah, that's gonna be enough, right? To take it for
X. That's gonna do it.
And this is so tricky, and this happens to me all the time. It's you sit there and say, okay, this is a load of power mid. Like I said, I would have just smashed Odin, pressed enter, and well, that's how I play the game. But when you think, but what if they play Orca on the right? And then you go, okay, I'll play around that. And then you kick yourself afterwards and be like, if I'd just gone with my first plan that I thought was the right play, naturally, then it would have been fine. And there is that trouble of when you consider the options, you have to just pick a thing and play around it, right? Because I do think that if I was Eggs, I would have done the Orca thing on the right and just assume my opponent wouldn't play like that.
I mean, what Lobster did there was play around everything but Wasp plus Onslaught, right? It was everything but. Yeah. And I think that's actually like a pretty reasonable thing to do. By the way, Raven, you should know, your dream is alive here. We could potentially play, thanks to the limbo, Eggs could potentially play Moon Girl into Orca. All we need to do is not play Orca now. Oh, your dream is dead. Raven, it's gone. It's gone.
It's a really interesting one, the turn 2 Orca, because there's limbo, and then like, what does Eggs do if like Lobster just starts playing stuff into Orca? You get like that weird thing where it's like it's empty, but then my opponent starts playing to it. If I play anything into it, I'll lose power. So then you have to get that much more power back to make it worthwhile. I always think that's really interesting, with this sort of turn 1 Orca play, because Lobster now has a very, especially with the kiln, clear and defined view of what the battlefield's going to look like, and the time to just say, okay, Orca, let's dance. I have Star-Lord, Groot, Wolfsbane, Odin to go into limbo. Let's go.
I think Eggs is sincerely about to just try to win that kiln with a Namor. I think that's where this is going. I don't necessarily think it's going to work, but it will at the very least keep the Nightcrawler pinned there if FreshLobster does not invest further. That is the
Groot was enough anyway, right?
The Groot goes to 11, right? 7 plus 4. If Eggs didn't play in there, the Nightcrawler and the Namor, the Nightcrawler still can't move if they end up putting the Namor there. As is, I personally
isn't Namor 10?
I thought he was 6 plus 5. Didn't they buff him? Wasn't that the whole thing?
Did they buff him to? I've literally never seen a Namor since the buff then, because I thought he was at 10.
Maybe he's 6 plus 4. I don't even remember anymore, but I think he was 11 last game. That mattered, right? He was 11 last game. Yeah, he's 6 plus 5.
Yeah, okay, that's me. I mean, not the biggest Namor player in the world, I'll be honest, and I've honestly not seen it proc its ability since that change, so yeah, my bad.
If we're gonna talk about plays here, though, I think that perhaps not enough time was spent thinking after Lobster snapped. Eggs was still working on her own game plan there, and I don't think the snap was taken into account here.
Right.
I do worry a bit about Eggs' ability to win another lane here.
Well,
I may
this
be
was
off
rough.
base, but
This was rough because again with Limbo, I was thinking what happens with Orca in Limbo. Then Eggs even obviously wouldn't have known this at the time, but could go like put Onslaught into Orca, put Omega Red into the Orca, you know, and just try and do that and push through the kiln in that way. But now it's too late because there's a Groot, there's a Rocket, there's a Gamora, like, and unfortunately there's Zabu tag teaming with Namor in the kiln, which is actually, you know, losing Egg's power, unfortunately enough.
Oh, that is so worrying. Like, seeing this, realizing the potential for Odin.
Oh,
I mean,
Guardians of the Galaxy, let's go.
Tough. It's just tough. The Medusa, the Wolfsbane, the Star-Lord, all of it is going very, very, very big. I don't particularly think either of Lobster's plays will lose him this one. Either of the potential plays he could make on this turn, I don't particularly think they're going to cost him.
Yet again, I would have just slammed the Odin and pressed end turn because I just think it's so much. At worst, it's like 8, well, more than 8, right? With the Wolfsbane and Medusa. Yeah, at worst, it's 1,000,000 power. At best, it's 1,000,001 power, right? With the Star-Lord if it hits. So it's like, it's so much. And there's no way they can add 12 power to the kiln, right? That option just doesn't exist in Eggs' deck, as far as
I would
can
assume
recall.
that the reason not to play it would be you want them to not know that you have it. You want to take the chance on Eggs being like, no, this is totally winnable, I'll stay. That's what he wants.
Okay. Yeah, going with the Odin.
And
now.
For the record, it is almost certainly not totally winnable in this scenario.
Those were definitely worse.
It's just sort of basic hiding of power, I think, here.
Yeah, that's fair. Everything in the pile on the left.
It seems to be working, honestly. Eggs seems comfortable playing into this because Lobster hit it, and because you're just like, okay, well, if it's Odin, fine, I die. But what if it's not Odin, right? The issue is, you know, with Limbo in here, we're very, very likely for that to be Odin. Like,
a general rule I highly recommend is if you're playing a full Limbo game, then assume your opponent has drawn every card in their deck, even though they obviously don't most of the time. But just if there's like, oh, I lose to this and this, let's hope they don't have it. They probably have it. So just leave if you're gonna lose. But yeah, Lobster assuming the position to just say, look at my ultimate power play with that Odin. And that's going to be a tough one. I think Eggs is nodding, knowing that's not going to be enough already.
Gross. That is...
It's just the fact that...
Odin is typically thought of as a card that puts power into other lanes. But in certain setups, he can be an absolute hammer in his own lane.
And the biggest thing for me is, look at this. There was 4 Guardians on board, and 3 of them hit. Like, that is a lot of power, right? Rocket, Groot, and Star-Lord hit, and the one that didn't was Gamora, which is 7 power anyway. Like, that sheer number is so high. And the fact that Lobster got them all to hit propelled him so far ahead. Now cloning Vats for what is potentially going to be the last round of this matchup.
If this wasn't already 5-1, I think Lobster would be snapping on this hand in cloning Vats.
Right. Oh, super flow. Okay.
It's so brutal. Like, we have Nightcrawler and Scorpion into there. We're running multiple Scorpions off of this. Like, Lobster is in cloning Vats heaven right now. This is as good as cloning Vats can be with things like this. Multiple repeating on reveal effects, Groot stacking, things like that. As good as cloning Vats can be outside of a Carnage.
I will raise you something, though. With this board, Eggs could double Orca.
That is true.
It's possible.
It is possible.
That's all that matters. Double Orca can happen.
It is technically possible we get the double Orca.
Oh, okay. The Raptors aren't too bad for eggs, I would say, just because that onslaught and Omega Red potential, right? Like, you know, Odin and reducing some of the space down for Fresh Lobster isn't amazing. Even just a Captain America in this Savage Land is a reasonable chunk of power, especially with the threat of the Omega Red.
What it does do is constrict both players on hand space, though. By constricting the board, these players are mostly going to be less able to play into cloning vats. You look at what Eggs is doing right now, putting a Cable into cloning vats, that's going to fill her hand up. Getting the card off of Cable and then getting the Cable back is going to fill her hand up. And so it does sort of restrict where they want to, because obviously neither one of them want to play on Superflow. So by restricting their ability to play on Savage Land, it also sort of restricts their hands.
And I feel like this is a little bit of a mistake from Eggs, because there was 2 energy floated, right?
Correct.
So I think I would have just either dropped to Sentinel or just played White Queen on Superflow. Also, you know what I mean?
Well,
just,
the White Queen came off the Cable.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm looking at the hand now. Yeah, or play Namor or something. You know, just because what you've got to think is, yes, Superflow's good for extra energy, but it doesn't like add 100 turns to the game, right? Like Lobster still has to play into it at some point if he wants to contest it. And I think just at this point, because I don't feel like the Cable and then pass on turn 3 was that strong, even with the Superflow. Like, I think just playing Sentinels out every turn would have actually just put a little bit more power on board and caused Lobster to actually have to do something bigger to challenge it.
Well, the middle version of that play would just be to play the Namor in the cloning vats. Like
all that
is happening right now.
Yeah, all that. I think for me, I don't know what Cable was going to pull. That, I mean, maybe, you know, hoping for the Odin or a Gamora, you know, to try and use that with cloning vats, maybe. I don't know, but it's definitely a tricky one.
Do you know what card wins Savage Land right now?
What card? For Eggs?
Yes.
What card wins Savage Land?
A 6/11, perhaps?
No! Good old Orkman.
Yes, okay. we are suddenly in a situation where Eggs needs to draw to Orca. Orca is the only card in Eggs's deck right now that is going to be able to win that Savage Land on the final turn of the game. The only one.
But here's the problem as well, right? Like, Lobster's going to have another Gamora in hand that might be buffed as far as he's concerned, right? It might be naturally buffed. Eggs can Orca, right? But how does Eggs win cloning vats and or Superflow, right? If that doesn't work, and we can see Eggs is going to play into it now to try and get something out, but there's so much power still available and flexibility with the Nightcrawlers that Fresh Lobster can choose to move or not to adjust the power level. So I think Lobster just goes all in. Like, I think Lobster tries to go middle of the road on both these locations.
Yeah, given his ability here to just like play Gamora, Medusa, leave the Nightcrawlers where they are, demand plays on both locations. This seems like the correct play to do. And of course, people should be aware, Fresh Lobster should never, ever, ever, ever retreat here, because retreating is the same as losing. When your opponent is at minimal cubes, it'll be 2 regardless of if you lose or if you retreat.
I actually think this play, and I'm sure Lobster's done the specific numbers, but I feel like this play from Lobster is 100% win rate. Because I don't know what combination of cards Eggs could play to win 2 out of 3 of these locations. I don't think in her deck it exists.
I would be tempted to agree with that.
Lobster leaning more towards Superflow now, actually, which I'm a little bit surprised. I think pushing like 5 or 6 power above your opponent in each location is pretty good, because how does Eggs play 5 or 6 power in 2 to 3 locations? You know, 2 out of the 3, and if it's the 3rd, he now knows the only way Savage Land is lost is through Orca. And if Orca's played, nothing else can be played either, so that it's a win either way. I think Fresh Lobster's positioned himself amazingly here.
It actually, this board also goes to show the power of Dr. Doom in this format, because when you talk about a way to put power into multiple lanes at the end of the game, like...
And that is going to be it. Fresh Lobster takes the first win of this tournament so far. Huge win there for Lobster. And again, I just think not only did both players play well, of course, I think both players did what they could with what they had, but I just think even just from the beginning looking at it, I would have much rather been Lobster with that deck than Eggs with her deck, because I just think you just look at card for card, all of them just dumped power on the board. And when first thing we said, oh, no Shang-Chi. Okay.
Yes. Rescue was a house, Gamora was a house, and there was absolutely no fear of counterplay thanks to the lack of Shang-Chi in the card pool. And that's one of the things that really sticks with you about this format is a lot of your heuristics that you have from playing normal Marvel Snap where every card exists. You have to think about what doesn't exist, and the cards that define the boundaries of the format, cards like Shang-Chi, cards like Killmonger, things like that define the boundaries of what is and is not playable. If those are cards that don't exist in the pool, then suddenly they are cards you don't even have to think about. And that means you have to radically shift how you approach building a deck.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the time, if there's going to be no Shang-Chi, I would very much like the max power with Odin on reveal deck. Maybe with the White Tiger, maybe not, but that's definitely something you've got a lot of freedom with, because there was no Shang-Chi and no Cosmo, so you have zero face apart from the locations themselves. But that was just our first match of the day. We've got plenty more coming up, so let's check out the bracket and see what that looks like and see what matches we've got coming up next. We've got Kawa versus Molt. Kawa got a little bit unlucky, lost the timer in the previous one, and ended up with an Agatha that still almost won him the match against Harry in the semi-finals of the previous Snap Arena. But, you know, will he do better this time? I'm sure he'll be slightly more focused and slightly more focused on the timer itself.
This month's Snap Arena is brought to you by BCW Supplies, our go-to source for protecting our prized collectibles. From cards to comics to coins, BCW Supplies has top-tier options to store, protect, and show off your rarest gems. Head over to bcwsupplies.com and use the code 983media to get 10% off your entire order. Protect your most prized comics, your most precious cards, and much more. You can help support this show and future Snap Arenas by following the link in the description below and use the code 983media at checkout to get that 10% off your entire cart. BCW Supplies. Protect, store, display.
Higher, further, faster, baby.
Friendly neighborhood Spider-Man here.
Call it the Kawa rule. We have removed Kawa. Nope, we've removed Agatha. We have removed Agatha from the pool, thanks to Kawa. One thing I'm really excited to see, though, when I described this mode to Molt, he made an analogy to a Clash Royale, I believe, mode. And so while it might seem like he's someone who's inexperienced with this mode specifically, he might have a lot of familiarity with this sort of snake draft style gameplay.
Right.
So this is actually a match I'm super excited to see, because while Kawa is someone who has experience in the format before, I think Molt could be a little bit of a dark horse here.
Yeah, there's a lot of ideas that move over, whether you're drafting from, you know, a huge amount of cards and building a huge deck in some other card games, or even non-card games to an extent like Clash, or whether you're doing it all the way, sort of narrowing that field down to 12 cards in Marvel Snap. The theory's still kind of the same, right? You need to have a good eye for what you want to build. Not only do you need to see what you want and when you want it, but also react to what your opponent's going for and see if you can really hurt them, just like in the previous match. I really believe the White Queen of Rescue not being on Eggs' side with that Zabu really hurt her, because if she had access to those, I think those games start to look a little bit different. But regardless of that, let's get into the draft for this next matchup. And as always, excited to just see how this one goes, because the draft is always spicy. Let's see what we've got here. Any big standout cards, Cam?
In terms of enormous standouts, I actually, like, it's all cards that I see that seem to need a decent amount of support, actually. I'm not seeing any of, like, the major tentpole cards here. This is a tough...
You know what I would go for instantly?
Huh?
I see Quinjet, I see Cable, I see Coulson. I would just Coulson's a nightmare in Conquest, I feel anyway, because you can't play around those cards. So I like the looks of those.
But there's no payoff at the top end for that deck. We have all the low end, but no Dino, right? We have Quinjet, Cable, Coulson, Moon Girl, and then what?
Abomination.
Right? And so you're seeing, so you're seeing that play out. One thing I'm interested in is what Kawa went for. I think he might be going for Profex Spider-Man here, building towards some sort of legitimate lockdown strategy. Kawa valuing the Cable very highly here. Intriguing.
Yeah, there's also, I was going to say, Mr. Fantastic's nice if you're picking up X. Then there's also, okay. There's also the idea of something I looked at is I saw Surfer, I saw like Absorbing Man and a selection of 3-drops, not the best 3-drops in the world, but at least something to look at. There's also Armor Atuma, which I don't think's the worst thing in the world either.
This is a really interesting pool. We've had 2 pools with very non-obvious early picks, I think, and this is extremely interesting.
I didn't even realize there's Collector there as well. That I would have definitely gone for the Quinjet Collector Cage, just smashed all the card generation into the cage.
If you pick one of them early, though, you end up in trouble. It looks like that's sort of like what Kawa is looking for. What Kawa is doing is introducing it as a sub-theme, right? And I think that's the safe way to approach it. One card I'd be interested to see from Molt is, I would be interested to see Molt pick up that Collector about as fast as he possibly can, given that he has a Kitty Pryde and an Agent Coulson. That said, he might be in a situation where his hand is too stressed. It might be too full for the Kitty Pryde to get her full, Kitty Pryde thing going.
Don't mind
Black Widow coming in from Molt, just a solid 2-cost card, and I think that's something that you can say about his deck is there's nothing underpowered in it here, right? Like there's nothing that is like that bad. Debris is interesting though, given that Kawa picked up a Hobgoblin. Debris might hurt us a little bit more than it hurts him.
I'll tell you something now, though. I've got a feeling Kawa, or at least if I was Kawa, I would be staring at that Valkyrie. Your opponent's got Black Widow and Debris. Like, you could look at the Valkyrie, use the Widow Bite to proc an extra 3. And now with the Mr. Negative pickup, well, now Valkyrie looks even better, I would say.
That is a ridiculous pivot. With all due respect, that is one of the nuttiest
it works.
I've ever seen. No, does it work though? Because a Hobgoblin suddenly becomes give your opponent a guy.
Look at everything but Hobgoblin though. You got Fantastic, Cable's fine, X is fine, White Tiger's fine.
Okay. No, the White Tiger was picked, that was the premise of the pivot, right? Okay, we're doing something here. We have hard pivoted into... We've gone off the rails. I honestly
really like Valkyrie now, because Valkyrie, suddenly you've got White Tiger negative, you can have the Widow's Bite, you can have a rock from Debris. Obviously, those are normally parallel, but regardless, you know what I mean? Like, there's enough here to warrant a Valkyrie, and you can hit it with negative, which again becomes interesting in itself. It's still 3, but it's cheaper.
Another card I'm interested if I'm Kawa is potentially Jubilee and potentially Absorbing Man. I think those are cards that have synergy with negative, White Tiger, Black Panther, things like that. It's definitely possible. Although, of course, the nightmare being you play Jubilee, pull negative Hobgoblin, and cry.
Hear me out, Cam.
Sure.
Mystique, so you can go X Mystique in the same turn. Is that not the best thing you've heard all day?
Kawa has taken me to a place I did not expect to go. I did not expect to see this happen in this format. And as is, I think personally that if I were to pick one of these 2 decks, I would pick the one that's not playing the world's weirdest Mr. Negative game plan. But Kawa seems to see something in this that I clearly do not. Like the power of a negative White Tiger, a negative Black Panther, that is undeniable.
Sentry? Come on, Kawa. I want to see the Sentry.
There's no way.
Oh, you'd be surprised. You'd be
No way.
surprised. Oh, if it happens, I'd love it. That's what Valkyrie will sort you out. It's fine.
Yeah, you're 10-4 totally playable card.
Look, you don't play Mr. Negative every single round, okay? Sometimes you want a 4-10. It's fine.
Oh,
Told you! I knew it! Don't ever question me again. And just to confirm, we had no knowledge of this. I had no knowledge that this was actually going to happen, but I just know Kawa that well. I knew he was going to pick Valkyrie. I knew he was going to pick Sentry.
About it. He
Yeah,
didn't
I
even
told
think
you.
about it. It's just like, I'm going for it. He knows what he's doing. Oh my God. I am blown away by everything that happened there.
Yeah. If you know, you know. Well, so far, though, it's going to be the Ghost coming down onto Nidavellir here. And they said move then. Honestly, second dinner letting people change their names are one of the worst things that's happened to this game. Because it throws me off so much. Because I know Kawa changes his name pretty much every month now or something. It's hard to remember who's who. But yeah, Molt.
What, so it's okay that Kawa does it, but not that Molt does it?
No, they're both idiots. Like, they both
I do
annoy
want to highlight one of the downsides of Black Widow is that sometimes giving your opponent just a free 0-cost guy is legitimately not that bad. And one of the times when that is true is when there are multiple Nidavellirs on the board.
Yes.
You're just like, why did I do that? They want that card. They are actively in the business of wanting a 0/0.
And this is going to be huge now. Look at this Hobgoblin potential into Avengers Compound. If Molt plays a Tumor, unlucky. Molt now just has a White Queen and an arrow because because that's just how Coulson rocks. But I'm just saying, like, look at what Kawa has access to. Like, he can go either way with this Avengers Compound, and I think no matter what, it's going to look pretty good here.
Well, I mean, the one that would look bad would be YOLOing Professor X.
Yeah,
There's
you're
no
not
way
doing
that
that.
actually
No,
happens, right?
No. I think the
I
most
would
likely is
expect-
just a Hobgoblin slam.
Yeah, I would.
It
expect
deals with a
Hobgoblin.
tumor, and it pretty much negates your opponent's play and makes your opponent guess as well whether you're going to further play into compound on turn 6.
Intriguingly, the White Queen points actually moving the Nidavellir towards Molt here. Really interesting situation. The White Queen, the Kitty, suddenly the Collector is one up there. And it's not like there's a lot of multi-card plays available here from Kawa. But it's also not like, okay, Molt could go Colossus and Cloak and Kitty, right? And just spread about as reasonably as he possibly could.
He could, but look at this Valkyrie. It's so strong.
Molt has the priority, though.
Well,
So depending on the order here, that Valkyrie might get pulled.
I was always playing Cable second.
Okay.
I think that, again, because I've been playing a lot of Aero.
Wait, no, doesn't the Valkyrie just lose? Am I missing something? Like, doesn't this play...
Does this
just
really lose to a...
lose?
Well, Ghost gains +1. The Valkyrie's 3, but it's still an extra +5 as well.
Valkyrie's on the other lane now.
Oh, okay, yeah, if you switch it... Either way, normally with this play, whoever has the most cards wins, right?
Right, but now, because of that arrow off of Coulson, it looks like, even without the arrow, just the arrow being 8 power, it looks like Molt's gonna take this.
Yeah, this was the tricky one, right? Like it was Molt's decision to get, well, not only decision to get the arrow. I don't think Molt decided on arrow. That was Coulson's decision.
I do. He controlled it.
But playing something big mid was really good there, because that's the thing Kawa was never going to deal with. You know what I mean? Like the point of Hobgoblin is you kind of let it rip and just let it go and let things happen, right? Is normally what you do with Hobgoblin, unless you're playing like Galactus or something. So I think that was a really good decision there from Molt, because there were options there where, you know, if something wasn't exactly arrow, for example, or something that big, then like Kawa was in a pretty good spot.
The issue is, you know, the White Queen on the previous turn giving Molt a Black Panther. means that 8 power was pretty much always able to go
It
there.
was available, yeah.
Yes.
I told you, Coulson. Just a casual
Yeah.
white queen and an arrow.
I mean-
and it's a 3/4. It's not even a bad card, stats-wise. Like, it's so strong.
There's an interesting thing here. If Molt plays out the armor, suddenly that Atuma becomes available for Kawa.
I was just about to say, so if Kawa plays right, that Atuma's never getting played, of course, right? But that is now not the case if we see the armor come down. You can see the nod there from Kawa.
One interesting possibility, though, of course, is Stegron knocking Atuma out of the armor lane at some point. Now, that said, interesting play here from Molt, because I would think after you saw the Coulson put the work in last time, you might be thinking Coulson Kitty instead.
Oh, okay.
You just
This
don't want
is
to
the-
give your opponent the Coulson cards. I get it.
Yeah, this is the other option as well, where Stegron mid to try and push one of these small cards to the left and just say, well, that's a finite number I can deal with. My other thought was, what happens if you Stegron Avengers compound? Especially because at this moment in time, Molt would not be giving anything too huge to Kawa for that Mindscape, right? If it was like Stegron Kitty on turn 5 and Avengers compound.
I do think it is non-negotiable that we play the Kitty. Oh, and Molt rips it there. That is exactly what he was going for with that Stegron play. We have to play the Kitty here, right? Or we just give them the Kitty? Is it worth giving them... Oh, this is a very awkward situation. I think maybe we're just supposed to do this, but we are in a situation where we need, like, 6-ish power on the Monster Island to win it, plus however much power we actually need on the Avengers compound if we play this Spider-Man. I wonder if we might not end up in a situation where Molt is super far ahead, but not necessarily, or has the ability to lock up multiple lanes, but not the ability to win them.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I would have gone Omega Red Kitty here, just because it's just a bigger number. And again, that's kind of how I play draft format. It's just bigger number, go burr. But the Atuma is like the perfect answer from Kawa. It's like, yeah, guess what? Didn't want to play there anyway. Thank you.
And now with the Mr. Fantastic, who is absolutely incredible here. The Mr. Fantastic is unbelievable here. Kawa has, I would expect, pretty much has the game locked up.
Well,
Not
I'm even
positive,
thinking,
but
I'm even thinking if yeah, it's not gonna work, right? Yeah, there's just nothing quite works for Molt there, and that's the tricky thing, and that's why a lot of decks that standard decks, constructed decks that run Spider-Man are built to win off Spider-Man, as opposed to Spider-Man's not just in there randomly, right? Because you need to be able to deal with the fact you just played a 5/4, which is not great.
We also just saw the Spider-Man nerf really mattering. Obviously, if you can hit a turn 4 Spider-Man onto the location that only lets you play there on turn 5, that will win you the game. So now that is no longer an option, except I guess if you hit Elysium, that ended up mattering a ton.
I'm still salty about the Spider-Man nerf.
Oh,
Elysium TVA. This is just like, if you didn't think Marvel Snap was fast enough, we would just have Elysium TVA. All the action.
I want Molt to think about snapping here.
I want
Molt to think about snapping back here. Maybe he's just happy that he's gonna get like his 2 or his 4, and maybe he should be, because like there are like some real risks in terms of what Kawa could bring to bear. But his deck has a much more normal curve, right? His deck is much more able to, we're just gonna like put points on the board. Look what's happening right now. We're putting 8 points on the board. We're getting more points. Like we're very good at deploying stuff. Where Kawa's deck has Domino, Mr. Fantastic, and then question marks, right? There's a Sentry, but the Sentry will lose in one of these games.
Oh, the cloak. Oh, these are mind melters. Like when there's like, it's like having New York at the end of a TVA game or something stupid, right? Like it's like, what are you supposed to do here?
Oh, that is just fascinating. Molt He's named Move. He's probably been in this kind of situation more than anyone else.
Right.
The situation where it's like, all right, I got a cloak. I need to make a play. I need to make a read. I need to guess where things are going. And that is what he's doing here.
It's so tricky as well because if it wasn't for this Elysium, I think Kawa would be like giga favored because Mr. Fantastic in a TVA game is so strong. But because of Elysium, there's no rules anymore. Like you just throw everything on the board and see what sticks.
Okay. Oh my. Oh my. That's gonna be 4 cubes going towards Molt off of this. That is genuinely remarkable because it is actually entirely plausible that Kawa did move. Like if Kawa was able to move another squirrel over there, the Mr. Fantastic could have won it for him, and that's what the point of the Stegron play was. That Mr. Fantastic is probably going to be the only thing there. You're going to move a bunch of stuff and try to get me. I am going to get that Mr. Fantastic out of here. That was really heads up.
And now Kawa in a bit of a dangerous spot. 4 health on round 4. Yeah. Molt only have taken 1 damage so far. And I think I'd be interested to know what you think about this, actually. When I'm in this kind of position, like this far behind, at least in health, I generally try and sort of up my aggression snap-wise to try and just peel health off my opponent. Because I think if you slowly lose and you go down to 2 health, then you're creating such a mountain for yourself to actually try and claw back. I'm like, look, to win this match, I need a 4-cuber to go my way, and then to try and pull some of that health back, and I think that's what I generally try and do. We've just seen Kawa snap now, and I think whether or not this is the best hand in the world, this kind of decision is needed at this point.
I am like Molt getting Kitty Pride in a Muir Island early is so dangerous for the Nexus. Just an unbelievably dangerous situation to be in.
But what do you make of this Dr. Octopus? Because that's significant. There's also Sentry Valkyrie as an option. But again, I think because Kawa hasn't built this deck, obviously it's not constructed. There's none of those cheeky Valkyrie plays, right? Where, even if you look at like Ant-Man and things like that to go beyond 3 or Blue Marvel or anything like that. So it's not quite as consistent.
We have Mr. Fantastic, but what I make of it is Spider-Man, right? Molt is not going to be expecting a Spider-Man. That Spider-Man came from...
And
the Spider-Man came from Agent 13. And so I just don't think that this is particularly beatable now.
Yeah, Kawa with priority was huge. Means that Stegron has no chance of kicking that Spider-Man away before shenanigans happen. Also helps that Kawa's at least equal on more than equal. Apologies, that was with the kitty down on Muir Island, which means those 3 cards.
If you're Molt, you put the kitty and no, I don't think it is.
You need a Tuma mid and then the kitty left with something else, and there isn't a something else.
It doesn't actually win the left. There is no something else, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think like armor would have already had to be down, right? And then just try and go that way. But this basically relies on Kawa just having no real power to add to the Nexus somehow. Yeah. And that's just unlikely, right? I think Molt's going to get out of this. I cannot imagine a world where this play happens. Molt's trying to say, what does Omega Red get me here? But I think 4 is very adventurous, I would say, as an additional number to win the Nexus.
He wasn't even going to win the hub off of that, right? Because we're already at 8-8 there. What would have happened if we add 16, Kawa adds like the 8? He wasn't going to get the Omega Red proc, basically. That was not okay. You know what? You're like, oh, he got a Coulson, right? That's true. But Kawa's deck doesn't play enough stuff early for me to be as confident in the Coulson, and Molt has the early kitty.
I always believe in Coulson. I would just snap. I just say Coulson will give me what I need to win this game. That's how you got to play the card.
Kitty is genuinely just like, that is so hard to deal with. Especially like when you look at Molt's hand right now, Kawa doesn't know that. But like you see the issue with the Coulson here. If we play the Coulson, we're not drawing a card next turn. And that's the kind of problem that Kawa's deck has. It's why he runs Domino in the first place.
I guess the tricky thing is though, what is Kawa gonna draw that's that good anyway? Because he needs to think about what is he gonna draw from Molt's deck, right? He's not drawing from his own.
True.
So yeah, I just think that when you see a kitty, maybe this is an over exaggeration, but I feel like the Mr. Fantastic does nothing. Like, because you've played a Fantastic on 3, your opponents play Kitty spamming it on 1. Like, 1 location feels auto lost with the Kitty already. So 2 power somewhere from Fantastic does nothing. So that's what would scare me initially about that. Looks like he's going to go for the Coulson.
Yeah, we're just not drawing any more cards this game. It's cool. We're good. That is all right.
Marvel. There is White Tiger for Kamatage, right? Like,
is Molt gonna do it? Is Molt about to make the play? There's the cloak moving the domino over into Slam Professor X. Is he going to make capital T, capital P the play?
Is that play that good?
In the context of having Sentry and Kitty Pride next turn, I think if it wins, it is phenomenal, right? Like if that Professor X pays off, it is phenomenal. We just get too big later to actually pull any.
I wanted to value the bounce on the
So he's now setting up for the Valkyrie over there. That's what's happening now. Is the and he's snapping off of that because he knows that it's the Valkyrie lane. But here's the thing: if that's the Valkyrie lane and they put another unit there, the Mr. Fantastic wins it.
Also, there's Blue Marvel for Kawa, which is also a big deal, right? Like Blue Marvel, and also Kawa is a Valkyrie enjoyer, so I'd be very interested to see if Kawa even considers Valkyrie, because obviously he knows Molt could have it, or he's just going to choose to say, you know what, he doesn't have it, go. And I think that's the option.
Oh my, it's going to work here.
Yeah.
I just saw Kawa mouth the words Valkyrie. He realized as soon as it was there.
I think it probably just slipped his mind, because of course it's like Weird World, you're juggling what you're drawing, you've got to think about what your opponent have and which part of their deck they have as well, because obviously they have some of their own cards, and I think that's the tricky thing, and you do forget about it sometimes. So a little bit unfortunate there. I did actually like overall Kawa's approach, but I just think that having the fallback of Kitty in the deck for Molt, I'm not saying that's the only thing that mattered, but it felt like a lot. It's like drawing massive insurance out on every single game you choose to play or choose to draw Kitty, because it's so much additional power that, like we said, with no Shang, no Killmonger, you just know will stick. It's hard to just overcome that as Kawa in this instance.
Right, and to me, I think Kawa's deck was a little more finicky and would have relied a lot more on like aggressive snapping when the things are going well and not really doing it when it isn't. And what ended up happening was he got punished for one of those aggressive snaps early, and that put him in a negative position, and suddenly he was really unable to enact the way his deck wanted to go, right? So a deck like that wants to be aggressively snapping when it is doing the things, but if you lose one of those games, which Kawa did, suddenly you find yourself in this position, you're down 9-4, your aggressive snaps suddenly, if one of them flips, you're in a ton of trouble.
Yeah, really tricky one there for Kawa, but it does mean Molt moves on. The newcomer out of that matchup to the draft format here is going to be moving on to the next round. But let's check out the bracket and see what else, what more matches we've got coming up. We've got a very interesting one coming up next, KM, as we have Zeee versus Dmoney. We'll see if there's still a couple after this one.